Hi, my name is Rod Sowden. I'm the Managing Director of Aspire Europe, and I'm going to talk to you in this module about competent governance and how to design a governance model for your program and some of the complex issues that we come across when we're setting this kind of thing up. One of the big challenges when setting up program and project governance is the relationship to organizational governance. Now, organizations have decision-making structures that have evolved over many years and reflect their industry and the culture and their values. When you overlay a big program and project into that, that maybe is cutting across some of those old structures or old values, you can hit lots and lots of issues. So in this picture, we're looking at the Piper Alpha tragedy a few years ago, and if you actually read up on that, and I would recommend it is worth looking into why it happened. This wasn't one big decision that went wrong, it was lots of little decisions that aggregated up, and not the right people were looking at or involved in those decisions. Confusion, guesses were being made, and that kind of thing that ultimately ended up with, literally a big bang. So when we're thinking about making decisions, we need to have some things in place. First of all, we need processes. We need to have ways to make a decision. We need to have approval journeys. We need to know who needs to be involved in that decision. We need to have the right information to pass judgment on the right way forward, because no decision is ever black and white. They're all in shades of grey, and therefore the people involved in that decision need to recognise that ambiguity and what is in effect an element of gamble. Now, the systems to support that reduce the risk in the gamble. So we need systems to support information so that we get it provided to us in a timely manner, and we need to have systems to make sure that that decision is verified and is actually put into place, because you can make a decision that isn't put into place, then your governance is weak. All right. Now, importantly, there we also need to think about authority. Who has the right to make these kinds of decisions? They're normally based around financial authorities, but there's also around risk, strategic direction, and many other things we need to consider. The other reason we've mentioned the word decision here, where you might have been expecting to see committees, is committees are often the consequence of not having these four things in place. Because really decisions need to come back to one person who needs the process and support to get them there. But in numerous occasions, we see committees put in place because the information isn't there and nobody really wants to take authority. And it's easier to do this through a committee where you're actually protecting each other, if you like, as a kind of series of punch bags that's protecting the decision maker. So, first things first, let's remember that this is all about the business case. The business case is the reason we are here, it's the reason we make decisions, and you'll be familiar from other modules that we've got the three-case approach, or the three-stage approach. We have the strategic business case, is this really what we want to do, is it a good idea? We then have the outline business case, these are the options, and then we have the full business cases, this is how much it's going to cost us. Those three stages are there to help decision making, and they are there to stop a big program and project running out of control and picking up too much momentum. So the idea is that from a governance perspective, we can actually stop this thing. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you look at why big programs go wrong, many of them were starting to go wrong very early, but nobody seemed to have the authority to challenge why it was still continuing, particularly if it had some political connotations to it. And so when we're looking at it from a business case point of view, governance, it's all about those three stages, making sure that we're committing and the right people are involved. And then if we look at the 5-case model that we're familiar with in this course, you're looking at it through this decision through different lenses, aren't you? Are we making the right strategic decision? Are we getting the benefits from the economic side of it? Are we making the right commercial decisions? Are we making the right financial decisions? And are we making the right decisions to keep control, which is the management case? Now, the 5 case model is all around making the right decisions, and they should be joined up. So that process is critical, and it's this model that joins governance to control. Now, we know that governance and control to a large extent are bedfellows, but this is the place where because they can overlap a bit, or in fact they can overlap a lot if you're not careful. When we are designing governance, there are a number of factors that we need to consider. First of all, pace. How fast is this program going to be moving, or project going to be moving? If it's up against very tight deadlines, then you need to consider that. It's no point in having a heavy committee structure when decisions are being made need to be made really quickly. We need to consider complexity. How difficult is this thing going to be? Have we done it before? How big is the impact going to be around the organization? Are we exploring new engineering areas in the way we're approaching it? What is it we're doing in this program that could cause us problems and needs us to slow down? So complexity is important. Impact, we're thinking about the wide scale effect of the way the business operations are working. The more the impact, the slower it will need to move. We need to remember this stuff. And there's more people that we need to have in. So if it's hitting a lot of business areas, they all need to be on board as business change managers. If we're going down high complexity in terms of technology or process change, we need to make sure we've got that expertise on board. And finally, we've got profile. How visible is this program? Is it out there in the public domain with lots of people looking at it, the press interested in it? The more they're involved, the more we need to make sure we get our decisions right at the right time. So some areas you need to think about when putting together your governance. So I think you'll probably be familiar with the structures that we need to have in place. So we got the portfolio board seeing the overarching shape of things. Then we'll have our program board, and of course we're really largely thinking about programs. Program managers are all about delivering projects, and the business change managers are always about delivering change. Now, for some reason, in most programs, the blind side is the business change bit. So we spend an awful lot of time building governance about decisions associated with spending money. We don't necessarily build the governance around the decisions around delivering benefits or delivering change and the risk of delivering that change in the wrong way to our organization. So those are the layers. Let's have a little bit of a more detailed look at this. So there's two sides of this. We've got the delivery side, which if you're from a program project portfolio environment, then you'll be more familiar with this. And so when we're putting together our governance, we need to think about decision making, about spending money. We need to make sure we've got planning, we've got control, that we know about how we're going to deal with requirements, stakeholder, risk, resource, those kind of things. That's the delivery side of it. Yeah. Some of those move across the business change side of it too. Have we got the resources to cope with the change? Are we getting the benefits back? Are we managing our business performance? Are we dealing with business case and risk? Is that case going to be continuingly viable? And have we got effective leadership of change? Effective leadership of change doesn't come from the program manager, it comes from sponsorship and the leaders in that area that are sponsoring it. The business change managers themselves have to be leaders of change. So when we think about our governance structures and scope, we need to think about the delivery side, but we need to think about the change and the operations side. And there's lots of things to think about in that area. And you need to make sure, even if you don't have teams or individuals, that all those roles are covered when you're putting this stuff into practice. We need balance between the delivery side and the change side. So designing the puzzle, let's build everything around the program manager here. We've got to think about the resources that the program manager will have, PMO, center of excellence, that type of thing. Very close relationship there. The program manager also has to have a close relationship with the corporate services. He'll have a relation, or she'll have a relationship with finance, HR. How's that relationship going to work? Every one of those blue lines needs to be defined. The program manager will have oversight of the projects, obviously, as the line, have a line responsibility in that area, and a strong relationship with the BCMs. The SRO, of course, will have a direct relationship with the BCM as well, but everything else goes through the program managers within a program environment. So really important that it's designed, that each one of those blue lines is defined effectively. It's not just a line. You need to think about what that interaction is, what tasks are going on, and what levels of responsibility do people have for handling that environment and situation. If you look at things like MSP and which you will have done over the building of your knowledge up to this point and the various other models, they'll only tell you about the what. What we've got to think about here is how. How does the program manager interface with those? Personal relationships, really important. But at this higher end, you've got to think about how does it function. Then we can think about individual authorities. So when we're designing our governance model, when I wrote the 2007 version of MSP, we introduced RACI, or you may prefer to call it RACI because it seems a bit more polite. But RACI is the way it should have been defined, because RACI stands for accountability, responsibility, consult, and inform. Okay, and RACI shows that accountability is above responsibility, which sometimes can get a bit blurry with the RACI model. However, there are some problems with this. We put it in MSP and it's still there now, but one of the problems is it's a little bit blunt. Yeah, so there's lots of people with responsibilities, only one accountability, and some of the stuff around consult and inform is a little bit inadequate. So things to think about. Is it sharp enough for what you need to do? We know it's better than just giving us a list of responsibilities, but you need to be really defined about what does responsibility mean? What does accountability mean? What does consult mean? And what does inform? Because if you consult somebody and they say don't do it, what's your level of authority into that? Okay, so can you ignore their advice? And if they're the expert, why should you ignore their advice? We're in the middle of the COVID pandemic still at the moment, and you think about all the advice that the government gets, or that you've got various committees. Some people want one thing, some people want the other. They're being consulted, but being consulted doesn't infer we're going to do what you say. And it doesn't infer a level of authority or knowledge either. And informs just you're going to tell them. The other thing that we found with these is that these terms are quite passive themselves. So they don't necessarily infer action. And really you need action-orientated terms. So if we look at a governance model that you might be using to set up at the moment, so if you look down there on the left-hand side, there's a load of activities you'd need to do. You need to put a issue management strategy, a risk management strategy, stakeholder. You need to build all this. And the core roles that you might be interested in would be the SRO, or the sponsor, got the portfolio office overall, we've got the program manager, the BCM, PMO, and any specialists. So when you're actually looking at this matrix, you can apply accountability, responsibility, and all those. And we were looking at one recently, and what we noticed was they quite often put accountability and responsibility with the same person, which is hugely bad practice, because the whole point of accountability is they provide oversight and checking of what the responsible person does. So we came up with one a few years ago that I think is worth sharing with you. And in this one, we've come up with 6 roles, and they all begin with A, so the 6 A's. And so what we have there is the authorizers, so that's the highest level in the structure. So they put the final signature on the business case. But then you've got the approver. Now they're accountable, in effect, for signing off that business case on behalf of the part of the business. So they carry a lot of authority for the changes that are happening. So it isn't one point of accountability really, but we've managed to disperse it a little bit. And then you've got the role of the assurer, okay? They're providing independent advice. Now, if I just think about the RACI model, both authorizer and approver could be accountable. Now, if you're looking at it for purely through the RACI model, you can't have that. But you can have it if you devolve it a little bit into this kind of thing. So the assurer provides independent advice. Now, you may or may not choose to take that advice, but you would be wise to take it and certainly not wise to completely ignore it. So that's why we have gateway reviews, that sort of stuff. We then have the advisor who provides content and possibly provides practical help to somebody else who we've called the assembler. So they'll assemble the draft document and pull it all together, but other people might have actions, yeah, responsible for certain tasks in relation to building up the business case or any one of these documents that we've highlighted on the right, on the left. So, you know, you can spread this around so you have a much more meaningful contribution. So if you were to take the risk management strategy, the SRO would be the authorizer, the program manager would probably be the assembler of it. The approver could involve the BCM because they've got to make sure it covers the business. It could be sponsors from other programs involved. So there's a lot more flexibility when you use a model like this. So when we're building these competency models, it's very easy for us to draw these reporting lines, put a plethora of committees in place, and then we can go to MSP or Prince2 or APM and get a whole load of responsibilities, allocate them to the committees or the boards, and away we go. We've done our job. But what we have found that it's much more helpful to allocate these jobs to individual roles. Yeah, committees and boards are ways of dispersing your responsibility. So to keep that line of sight, it needs to be really clear what each member of that board is responsible for. So we do that and we give them tasks and we do all that. But then there's the last thing that we quite often forget. Yep. And it's the problem for sponsors and SROs. We put them in charge of a program and what we forget is they're not competent. Yep. So making somebody accountable for risk when they're not competent people isn't really helping us. And the person that makes them accountable should be accountable themselves. Because if I put somebody in charge of a job that they're not capable of doing, then it's my fault that they're not capable of doing it. It's not their fault. This is the role of competency frameworks. Now we're getting better at producing competency frameworks for program and project managers, but the whole roles around sponsors, SROs and those kind of people are missing. And we just don't give this enough thought. So thinking about what we need to put in place, we need to make sure that when we make somebody responsible or accountable, or we give them the job of assembling or approving, we need to know they've got the right skills, the right knowledge, the right experience, the right authority, the right behaviors and the right values to actually be able to do that role. A really big hole in a lot of the governance. If we look at certain, big failings of late, things like Crossrail, those people won't work. Those people were not working hard, right? Those people were giving it everything when those programs were going wrong, but they clearly didn't pass the test of personal competence. Otherwise, those things would not have gone wrong. Okay, just a little bit about the balancing act. When we're designing governance, there are three areas we have to look at. Governance itself, and once we've decided that, how do we manage control that governance and make sure it's happening and make sure that we are involved in the decisions or the right people are involved. But there's the third dynamic, which is assurance. Assurance, the independent verification that you're doing the right thing, the independent expertise that helps you look in the right direction. So what you're trying to do is get balance. And if we look at some mega programs in the UK, something like the Olympics, they were overwhelmed with governance, control, and assurance. And we did reviews them for the National Audit Office, and they almost had teams of professionals that were being rolled out to assurance reviews. And the thing that came out of that was integrated assurance, which means that when you design your assurance, you don't have lots of people asking you the same questions all the time. So you need to think about that. But also you need to think about, well, actually you can get away with a lighter governance model if you've got a really effective assurance model. What you don't need is heavy duty in all three cases. Okay, well, that's the end of the course. Thanks for your time. I hope it proved interesting, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of the course. There's a whole load of more material in there for you to look at and learn from, with examples and ideas that you could use to put it in place. I'll speak to you in module 2.